Hey now, cats, we're back again this week. And with me today, I am excited to have with me a very special guest. He's a guy that has a lot going on. He's spinning a lot of plates and a lot of different sticks, and we're going to learn a little bit about what he's all about today. The great Kevin Michaels is with me today. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, boss. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, the pleasure is mine, sir. I'm eager to talk to you. I mean, you might know him from his iconic Troma cover art, from what I hear. You may know him as a producer. Correct me if I'm wrong, an actor, correct?
That's right. Well, I just want to be known, right? That's for something. That's like on Wikipedia, it says known for.
And,
So, yes, correct, sir.
and is this correct? You're a current member of the legendary improvisational sketch comedy group, The Groundlings. Are you still in The
I'm
Groundlings?
I'm not a, I was, no, I actually was in the side group that Gary Austin, who started the Groundlings, I was in his troupe
Ah,
that was currently with the Groundlings. Yeah. So we do a lot of fun stuff in LA.
but most importantly today, what I really want to talk about, and I watched it, I absolutely fucking loved it, dude. Kevin Michaels, he just did a documentary. His latest film is on the late, great, well, is he late? Great Andy Kaufman? Give it up
Maybe. I
for
mean,
give it up for my man Kevin Michaels. I'm so excited to talk to you, sir.
thank you.
But
He didn't.
before we dig into all that, man, I don't mean to cut you off. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about your relationship with Troma, but most importantly, I don't really know that much about you. Normally, when I interview somebody, I kind of got a little background. So I wanted to ask you a little bit. Where did you grow up? Where are you from? What was your life like as a kid?
Oh, I'm from Brooklyn, and I grew up, very much of an American pie kind of a inner city kid. A lot of that stuff, typical. Drinking, Coca-Cola and eating bologna sandwiches. So it's humble for sure.
What was you like as a kid? Like, were you into like horror at the time, or was you into like comedy? Like how, like
Oh, yeah, a lot
what
of
was the
inappropriate.
definitive moment you fell in love with these genres?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of a common thread, like some of the guests you had on the show, where they say, they grew up on the Amityville movies, they grew up on the Friday 13th. It was pretty easy to get into films in the old days, Especially my parents would love to take me to R-rated. I saw Porky's, I mean, things like that, things I probably shouldn't have been seeing at that age. And of course, when VHS came out, I saw everything. But you fall in love with all these genres, and there's really like a lot of people say, there's no trash cinema, there's no B movies, and it never felt that. It was just felt if something was entertaining, it was worth watching. You know what I mean? And people put their heart and soul, blood and tears, everything. They lose their homes over making films, and independent art is tough, So people make fun of stuff, but I always just really loved everything, from the mainstream all the way to independent art.
Yeah, I'm just a lover of film. Like I surely love horror the most. That's my favorite genre, but I can appreciate and I love just something that's like you said, you hit the nail on the head. Like it doesn't matter what the budget is. It doesn't matter. What matters is you go into film as an escape, escapism, and like it's as long as I'm entertained, I can look past anything. Like I mean, that's the whole purpose, I think. So, oh, can you name me some of the films that influenced you coming up as a child?
Oh, sure. Well, I can tell you, first of all, The Exorcist, when they ran that on TV, that was probably one of the scariest nights I've ever experienced, with all those goofy commercials in between. The Exorcist with commercials is just the best. You know,
I don't think I've ever seen it with commercials.
it's an experience because it's not like, you have in a streaming thing that's Roku and it's one little, the same commercial over and over again. These were like all the wrong sponsors that ABC had picked. It was just a nightmare. And of course they had to cut everything, right?
I was
So,
gonna say, how did that go? Your mother sucks socks in hell? Like, what did they do there? I mean,
well, in the old days, you just used to take the audio out. So it
oh,
was just,
I don't know which is worse.
didn't know what she was going to do with it. Right? And then years later, I became friends with Eileen Dietz, and I used to see her, and she would tell me about the spider walking and all that stuff like that. So all that stuff was, that they restored to the film later on. But I think that was like the scariest film I had ever seen. Up
I
until
think
that.
it is probably indeed the scariest film still. Like it left a big impression on me growing up for sure. I mean, I was like you. My mom was always cool, and like we always from a very young age, my grandparents would take me to this little mom and pop video store, and anything that caught my eye, and you know how like the box art was back there, man. I mean, the horror movies were the coolest, so of course you wanted to see all that stuff. And I was watching shit that I probably, by all rights, probably shouldn't have seen that young either. But I mean, I came out okay, right?
That's right. And I don't know if you remember, Balls, but you remember Frankenhooker used to have this box
Want a
that
date?
they
Yeah,
wanted.
that was
So
great.
they were pretty far on like marketing things like that, you know. And that was, you know, again, that's like to think about the undertaking, something like that, to have a talking box, right? At that in that time period. I mean, this must have been amazing to do something like that and replicate that, you know. But you know, when VHS came out, it was kind of an even playing field, right? So you're able to have so studios were able to compete. They couldn't license films fast enough to put them on VHS. There was all this, you know, red tape and so forth from lawyers. But the independent studios could move on it, you know. The Tromas of the world could move on it. And it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. Charlie Band, all those people that came up, you know, seeing all the, you know, the puppet masters, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and we came out fine. Of course.
See, that's the thing. That's the one thing that actually bothers me about like today. Like kids now don't have that experience, man. It's such a lost art. Like one of my favorite things was going in and finding that diamond in the rough, seeing these, you know, these box arts still like have impressions of me as an adult. Like, I mean, I could think right off the top of my head, the Dead Pit with the glowing eyes. You know, there's just so many different, and you know, kids that's lost on them today. You try to explain it, and they're just like, yeah, everything's such a easily digestible and at your fingertips that you kind of lose some of that charm. But I mean, I just I don't know what to say. I wish there was some way that like you could still kind of bring that back, but that's probably just me being an old guy.
To be honest, I'm starting to see some signs of that because I think some people getting interested. I mean, just like people getting interested in metal, you know, it's still a subgenre, but like people, you know, there's people that you know take it into their own generator. There's a lot of bands that are like popular again, or more popular than they ever were in the '80s, like Iron Maiden. You know, so a lot of that art is coming back, and you know, and it used to be someone wearing a T-shirt they wouldn't even know what band it was or never heard of them. You know, like a Metallica shirt or something like that. So I'm starting to see some evidence of people kind of rediscovering like the fantasy element of it. You know. And that's what it really was. Like when you saw that Evil Dead box with the woman with their outstretched hand, you know?
Oh yeah, that's iconic.
Yeah, I kind of knowing that that might happen in the movie, may not. You know, if you rented it, you'd have no idea.
That was the best part too. I mean, you really didn't know until some of the time you would see like the coolest box art, and then the film totally sucks balls and it had nothing to do with the box art at all. Or it even exceeded your expectations. So I mean, that was the rolling the dice, and that's part of the fun, I thought. But
And I was thinking about this. When you watch a film like a Blumhouse film now,
yeah,
it's like no nudity in it at all, and so like it's like you can't even watch it for that now. So if there's like those you know, or there's some teenagers in the woods, you know, nothing's going to happen, and they give you the rating for it, so you know that it's like it just says sexually suggestive.
yeah, that bothers me too, man, because you never really kind of have that element of surprise anymore. Now at the beginning, you see. Now it's kind of like even with television, you know, it's funny. My wife, I got her watching The Boys now. So like at the beginning, they're like graphic sexuality, violence, blah blah blah. I'm like, oh, you know, that's going to be a good episode. You know, like everything's gauged by that now. So there's no element of surprise. But I don't know.
Well,
Is it a good thing or a bad thing? What do you think?
yeah, I can be kind of fuzzy, you know, about it. You know what I mean? It's like you pass the pervert stage, you know, and then all of a sudden you just
Well,
just kind of
let's actually. I want to. I just well, it's fresh in my head. I just watched your documentary, Kaufmania. I have to tell you, I want to let's talk Andy Kaufman. It's clear to me that he left a big impression on you. When did you discover your love for him, and how did this documentary like come to fruition? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
well, it's kind of a series of coincidences because do you know who George Shapiro is or actually was?
I've heard that name. It sounds familiar.
So, you know, at the end of Seinfeld, you see George
Oh yeah,
Shapiro.
yeah.
So
Okay.
they had a Shapiro West, and he was Andy's manager.
Hmm.
He was played by Danny DeVito in Man on the Moon. And so that's George Shapiro. And so yeah, him and Howard West started a company. They managed Jerry Seinfeld and they produced Seinfeld. So they did a lot of great things. I think they also they worked with Larry David too.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but George Shapiro, he was the guy who said you should do something on Andy, but from a fan perspective, and he really liked what I was doing. And we had a couple of meetings, and he said, "I'll get you in touch with people." But the weird thing is that whenever you do a documentary, it's sort of like Michael Moore, which I kind of look like Michael Moore today. But it's like when you're like Michael Moore and you start becoming part of the story. You're not trying to make a CNN thing or some expose or some true Hollywood story. So I started to become friends with Andy's old friends.
Oh, wow.
Little Wendy, who was a writer, but here's what was weird about it is that they said, let's make it a bunch of sketches and let's all get together, because I didn't know Andy had people that were helping him write things or come up with bits, like Bob Samuda,
I never did.
movie, but I didn't experience it. So that was the kind of idea, is like, we'll put together this documentary and it'll be part this, part that, and then we'll see, and it'll be written. We'll put in little bits. So I got Andy's old writing team back together. It was kind of miraculous. So it was like Andy was in the room, and creepy stuff. I know this is not a paranormal podcast, but like creepy stuff started to happen. Things were falling off the wall. Posters came down. All kinds of things were moving. Andy was
Well, that's
definitely.
definitely a creepy podcast. So that's definitely appreciated for sure.
I don't know how much you believe in that, but it's like I started believing.
I do, man. I was skeptical as a kid, but I've had some things happen, and I'm like, it's beyond a shadow of a doubt to me now. But that's actually, it's funny. You brought up a good point. What I did like about this documentary is sometimes documentaries kind of have they kind of get boring, like, and what I thought was cool was this almost seemed like a kind of a fresh, unique kind of take on it, where there was sketches, but there was the things that you at the end of the day, at the end of the movie, you learned about Andy, but you also got to see a little bit about, you got to see stuff from people that actually was influenced in, just how much an impact they had in their life. And to this day, like, they still do things, from that inspiration. So I thought that was actually a really fresh take. It was really, really cool to see that kind of, and it wasn't your average documentary. It was pretty unique, I thought. And it was pretty engaging, man. Like, I was watching it, and then I usually, as you can tell, I have OCD. So like, I hate shutting shit off. So like, I didn't want to have to shut it off. So like, I blew through the whole thing, and man, it was great. But I wanted to actually tell you, you have a lot of great people in this documentary. Believe it or not, you actually have a friend of mine in this documentary. That's what I want to tell you. Kelly
Oh yeah.
Dwyer.
Oh.
Yeah, a buddy of mine turned me on to her like many years ago. We used to go to her show. She would come to Pittsburgh, and she would do her performance art, and we became friends on Facebook. And I seen her, and I was like, holy shit, man. Like, how do you got Fred Willard? How the hell did you score Fred Willard? Like, how did all the cast come together?
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing, because the initial concept, the funny thing, goes full circle, right? Because I'm a big fan of the Christopher Guest movies, The Best in Show, The Waiting for Guffman style, Spinal Tap, all that kind of stuff like that, right? That's a genre all to its own. Not too many work in it. And I got in contact with Fred Willard, and he said, you do groundling stuff, you do this thing. We started to become acquaintances in LA. And he said, why don't you do it that style? Like, why don't you do little bits and things? So it kept being talked about that we were going to do these little vignettes. But like somebody like Kelly, like, you just put her on the street. Everything you saw there, like she's just running around in a rat suit.
Yeah.
Like during the Andy Kaufman Awards, she wasn't trying to be weird or trying to do something. It's like, this was just a thing. And if you can get that reaction in New York, you know what I mean?
I was gonna say, you guys, the New Yorkers seen everything. How do you even get a reaction? But man, they did.
There's something about her that sparks off people. She's amazing. How do you know her, by the way? Just from her. Did you work with?
A buddy of mine was friends with her, and then he took me to one of her shows, and we went to, every time she'd come in town, we go see her, and we ended up just kind of becoming friends. And I still follow her on Facebook, and I've been following her work for probably 10 years, I bet. And just a really funny and creative woman for sure.
Oh yeah. So these are real people. What you see, they're like, of course, Heather is a real wrestler. Heather Monroe is an actual wrestler. She didn't train to be a wrestler in 5 minutes, professional wrestling like that. And I said, we'll make something like a Raging Bull. That's why we called it Raging Baloney.
It was great.
And it's like the story of this, she's so pissed off at a boyfriend, she becomes a professional wrestler. And that was Fred Willard's idea.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I didn't know he had all that. I didn't know he had creative input too. That's really cool.
Yeah. So he says that little bit about, coming out to your parents that you're a professional wrestler. That was his joke.
Yeah, that was great. Well, let me ask you, what was the easiest and hardest part about making this documentary?
What was the easiest and the hardest? Well, the easiest thing was like you said, the love of the game, right? Because you grew up and you watch this stuff, Man on the Moon, and all, Andy's body of work, right, and the whole mystery of it. So the easy part was saying to myself, I should do something. I guess the hardest part was finding everybody, because I reached out to his brother, and it's a whole thing. And even with the internet, man, it's not that easy to find everybody, to get people to agree to things. And there were a few people that didn't want to come on board, which was, because they all dated Andy. There was like he'd had a lot of groupies, man, just like in the movie.
Wow.
All the female comedians that coming up at that time in the late 70s. And Lloyd's in the movie. He had a brush with Andy, Lloyd Kaufman. So he had.
I noticed that. That was cool. That was
yeah. Andy used to go to the 8th Street Playhouse in New York and support Troma. So he was, you know what I mean? It's like,
no, that's just that's amazing. It's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
And that's what's wild, because like you said, like you got Killy. It's like it does come around. It's people say small world, but it's even a smaller world for some reason, because everybody kind of came into like it's not even 6 degrees, like 2 degrees, or 98 degrees, which is my favorite band.
Oh yeah, Nick Lachey, big fan.
Yeah, watch this guy.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you also. Where can we see this? I mean, is there going to be Blu-rays, DVDs? Like, I mean, what's
yes.
distribution going to be like?
Yeah, we have to do our streaming. We haven't done that. We got, the pandemic happened and all that stuff. We put it on hold, and that's then we started doing film festivals. We did the Palm Springs Film Festival, doing a couple of comedy festivals. Now that Andy got his star on the Walk of Fame, though, people are starting to know his work again. So I think it's a good thing to maybe do some, screenings around and do some fan events and see how that works out. And we'll see, although we'll see how it works out, because everything can be virtual now. We can do I like to do like one big virtual event so people can see it, and maybe we can do it for a good cause. Who knows?
Oh, cool. One more question about and then we'll change topics. I wanted to ask you, the woman in your documentary, is that really Andy Kaufman's daughter?
Okay, so here was the story. So she popped up one day when they were doing the Andy Kaufman Awards, and Michael Kaufman, Andy's brother, totally, embraced her and said that's it could be, didn't know, and get this, he went on CNN. What you see there about TMZ and CNN, it became a viral. And
because as I'm watching, I'm like, oh, this is a put on. But then the more I watch, I'm sort of like, maybe it's not. So like, I'm really not sure.
Yeah, and it's a while. The world of performance art is very much steeped in Andy's legacy, and so that's something that I wanted to point out. That's why it's something I tried to break format. You know what I mean? A bunch of talking heads. We've seen all these things, and so I just like, okay, let's see if we can. And that's why I was saying, like the Christopher Guest influence, the Spinal Tap, that kind of thing, what they call mockumentary, whatever it is, it really needs to be explored. I hope that people out there like start making these things, and don't worry about it being academic. You know what I mean? Just, you know what I mean? People can go and read more about it, as they say, but to just have fun with it, have fun with the genre and see how people interact, like, and show people doing their art. That's the most important thing. And I think that's what Andy, from the feedback I've gotten from people that knew him, that's what he wanted. He wanted to continue on, and that's how you do it. You make more art. You don't have to be a carbon copy.
Let me ask you this, Kevin. Is it hard to juggle so many passions at once? You seem like you have a lot going on at one time. How do you keep a healthy balance between work life and home life?
A lot of fiber. That's the thing. Metamucil is a good. Uh,
Crackers or powder? I gotta know.
it's orange powder, man. I grew up on that and became Metamucil. That happens over time. But it's an interesting time for the industry now because of the strike. Everybody's out of work. The WGA just came back on board, but that this strike may be going on for who knows, months. So even that kind of thing. So you do get pulled in different directions, but you have to trust the path. As Lloyd says, "To thine own self be true," right? And you gotta start reading literature, which is like I don't have anything to plug, but like Far from the Maddening Crowd, right? This book, very important. This is a you got to read books like this. Leo Tolstoy. Let's see if we can get into focus here. Here he is, Leo Tolstoy. Very important. Korean. It's like you got to read literature, and you find out that people did things. They multitasked before multitasking was the thing. But I'd like to follow the path of maybe a Renaissance man or something. But I get caught up in that stuff because people are seen as many things, right? But primarily, I try to just be a good artist. That's what I'm interested. To me, that's what's important.
Can you tell me a little bit about being a producer, and did the strike affect that?
Oh, well, yes. Here's the thing, right? People say that producers are supposed to be the be all and end all. I kind of learned from Lloyd that everybody is a producer on a project. You know what I mean? And the director is the person putting the garbage out, right? That's how you tell, right? Or the director is the person on the sub whisper. It's an interesting thing because if you got to let people kind of do their, they all have their parts and they all kind of do what they're supposed to do. It's like a little bit of an army, right? So it's a fascinating thing. I know you've talked about this on your show before, but it's like independent projects are not like other projects.
No.
And people talk about wearing many hats and how do you do that, and then people get super jealous about it for some reason, and they say like, oh, you think you know it all? You think no, you make lots of mistakes, you fail a lot, you should fail a lot, as a matter of fact. And when somebody says, what are you going to do? You're like, I'm going to make a lot more mistakes tomorrow. And that's a good lesson to know, as far as going into a project, right? That's why people spend 5-10 years on a movie, and like I said, they put everything into it. And so that's what I found out. It's like, okay, I have skills, but I had to find more skills. I couldn't just say I'm just not literate in this area. I don't know how to be an editor, so I'll leave it to an editor, that kind of thing. And I'm sure you've heard this a lot, but it's important to know all the jobs if you can, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're good at them. Leave it to people that know what they're doing.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about your affiliation with my real dad, the legendary director Lloyd Kaufman, and in the leader of the longest running truly independent film company, Troma Studios. You did some iconic artwork, some cover art for them, and it blows my mind. I grew up loving your work, actually, and I still do. How'd you get involved with Lloyd? How'd you get involved with Troma? And do you have any fond stories about Lloyd that you could share with me?
Oh, sure. Well, at first about the art, we did 250 covers, and this was in the days when we had to get things approved by Blockbuster.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, we should talk about that. Okay. Now, I'll diverge from 1 second. I'll just tell you this little story. Lloyd literally had one of the first meetings with Netflix, but just when Netflix started, with the two people that started it, and they were talking about streaming and stuff like that. Nobody had ever heard of any of that stuff, literally 15 years ago. But they started it, and it was just really, really funny. He just didn't think that was good, necessarily the future of the thing, because we were so embroiled in this whole thing of DVDs and people renting things. That's how Troma was running. Mm-hmm. So we would 4 or 5 titles a month, and that's a lot. Just spitting them out. So that kept me very, very busy. But we ended up doing 250 titles. So that's almost the entire Troma catalog.
That's amazing.
But what Lloyd taught me, this is funny. He said he wanted the tables at the conventions to look like fruit stands, like with like signs sticking out, 5 cents.
They still kind of do, to be honest with you.
We even had an idea like weighing it on a scale. And I said, okay, we can do like, like a farmer's market style. So that's what we started to do. Started to do color coding, and people would buy things just to be completists, right? Like, or everything. People would buy things just because they're purple or just because they're red. And it started to work out. But I had to come up with a system to do that. And it had never been done. There's no collection like a Troma collection. Everybody sees those spines. They know what it is,
Oh yeah, man. Out of your Troma body of work, what are you most proud of? Is there a cover that stands out in your mind?
There's many. The Class of Nukem High box set
Oh,
was one because it's embossed. There's like a bald girl with a
yeah, I'm familiar with it.
yeah. I found out they couldn't do cleavage. I had to beg them to do cleavage on the box. Tales from the Crapper, we did lenticular 3D on that. That was really interesting. We
I
did
remember that.
a whole thing that folded out. But I was a big fan of Kiss. I always liked the idea of opening these unboxing things, and there's a booklet and a poster and a sticker. That's what always excited me. I always loved that, especially like what Kiss would do. Those kind of bands. That's the excitement of the thing. And sometimes people didn't buy it for the movie. They just bought it for something that was special about it, or just because they wanted them, or that just was a series. So that's the kind of marketing that like a lot of people like could really do, more of, especially now because people are getting back to some physicality. And, it's like vinyl is back, you've probably heard about how big vinyl is now.
I'm a vinyl nut, and I have to say I'm still a physical media nut, and that stuff still means a lot to me. Like I mean, streaming is great, okay, but like it's never gonna have that same thing. Same with records. That's what I like about vinyl. Same. That's what I like about DVDs and Blu-rays. Like I like sitting down. I like having that physical, like intimate moment where I'm looking at the back. I'm looking at the books. I'm reading for an album. I'm reading the lyrics. I'm looking at the cover, the gate folds, all that stuff. It's just not the same when you just could just put it right on. Like you don't, it's not the same experience. You're really losing kind of the soul of it, I think. And it, so yeah, I mean, I wish more of that stuff would come back, and it makes me happy to see that is in fact the case. So I mean, I got a couple more things here for you, so I want to make sure I get them in here, man. And let me ask you, all the projects that you've had a hand in, what do you consider the most challenging?
Um, well, let's see. I mean, I worked with David Lynch, which was interesting. That was a when he started his foundation to do transcendental meditation,
Mhm.
and we had to figure out. It was an exciting project. We had to figure out how do you get David Lynch and kids meditating into the same sentence and make that work, considering he had so many wild films. And I brought a lot of my knowledge of cult movies in there and said, well, how can we accentuate the positive? And we had a lot of meetings about it, but eventually we did it. We got Donovan on board. Russell Brand came on, Katy Perry at that time, because he was married to Katy Perry. Jerry Seinfeld started becoming a meditator. It was very interesting, but to bring my knowledge of cult movies and then bring my knowledge of like nonprofit organizations into there, try to meld the two. So that was very, very exciting. Plus, David is very weird. He's got this weird voice, and he's kind of like, Kevin, you have to learn to meditate if you're going to work with me. That's the thing. He waves his hand around like this, and he tells you the weather. And and you get weird phone calls from him, and he doesn't drink coffee so much. And so, but I'd grown up on Twin Peaks. That was a big thing, big influence. Of course, John Waters, another big
Oh
influence.
God, I love John Waters. Oh,
Yeah.
he did a commercial for my show. I met him before. It was awesome.
And he's just got his star on the Walk of Fame. So the
That
thing
should have
is,
happened a long time ago. I feel it's criminal it was this long, but that's just me.
and if you stay around long enough, you become mainstream. You become, a force to be reckoned with. Is something that people check out. The Academy Museum in LA is now selling copies of Pink Flamingos, and it's on the Criterion Collection.
That's amazing.
I mean, you can't get more mainstream than that. Toxie, look at what's happening with that. That's all blowing up now.
That's amazing. I never thought I'd see the day for that. But that's amazing.
There you go. That's amazing.
I got one more for you, man. Before we get out of here, what is the best gift anyone's ever given you?
Oh, the best gift anyone's ever given me is for, okay, I guess I could have a metaphysical answer, but you talk about a physical thing?
I could do both. I could do either. I could do or.
Okay, well, I guess I'm going to say the best gift was advice. When this is going to tie into your couple of questions ago. When I started at Troma,
Mhm.
Lloyd said, this is kind of like Andy Warhol's factory. We're going to leave the door open and people are going to just come in. They're going to do art. They're going to leave, going to do whatever it is. The building is there for everyone. And that was a great gift for me because I had loved Andy Warhol so much. And I said, that's great. That's what we'll do. And I don't think he meant it necessarily literally, but it was a great gift for me to say, I got to just, you know what I mean? Not think I'm in think I'm in a public building, think I'm serving people. Because that's what you do as an artist. You serve people, right? Like you were saying about the box covers, things you saw as a child, all the stuff that touched you, right? Stayed with you.
Yes.
And that's the greatest gift. The greatest gift was like, hey, don't be afraid of the fans, embrace the fans, but make them part of it, make it inclusive, not exclusive. And so that was the greatest gift. So I really thank Lloyd for that. It's just a wonderful mentor for me. So that sort of answers your other question. That's what it was, yeah. And I do accept, cash apps and chocolates. So it's that.
Well, that actually leads me to my last question here. Lastly, where can we see what you're up to next, and where can we keep up on all your projects so we can follow you there, Kevin?
Oh yeah, so I'm on Facebook and on Instagram, and people can follow my adventure. And I hope to do some Facebook lives, and maybe you and I can team up on something, coming up in the future.
I would absolutely love that. I would
Yeah,
jump at the opportunity for sure.
be cool. Let's talk about that at some point.
Please do, man. That would be great. So yeah, you heard of Cats, the man, the myth, the legend, Kevin Michaels. Check him out. Follow all the stuff he's doing. Great dude, and make sure when you have the opportunity to check out Kaufmania, because I seen the Cats. It's phenomenal. So you'd be doing yourself a great disservice if you miss it. So make sure you check that out. Thank you so much for dropping by, Kevin. Thank you for being on my show. I am truly honored. Thank you, my man. Always great to talk to you. So thank
Big
you.
fan.
Oh,
Big fan.
thanks, man. That means a lot to me. I now I have 7. They're growing. They're growing. I'm finally getting somewhere. But thank you, sir. And I appreciate you dropping by. Sincerely, thank you for being on the show. And peace and love, sir. Peace and love. This
Peace
is
and
a
love.
serious message.
Thank you, sir.